Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the SAPI IP Business Talks. Now, today, in this CET afternoon, we are again in the United States, like last week on Friday. And I'm very happy to have with us today Dana Robert Colarulli, and he is Executive Director LAS International. And for the ones who have followed us so far, so you know that there is this big topic of sustainable smart city, and for many people for many IP people it's a bit strange, so it sounds abstract, far away from IP issues. Our today talk is about what is it really, where comes it from, why it is so significant, and why is it a lighthouse issue, what a knowledge economy means, and what the role of IP is in a knowledge economy, and why we can only realize this obviously important concept of a smart city when we solve many very complex IP topics. So some housekeeping. This is a live show. We do that on LinkedIn live. Why? Because you can give us your comments, your questions into the show, and whenever possible, I will ask or bring your comments and questions into the show and discuss that with Dana. So, Dana, thank you very much for joining us today. And always my first question to the guests is, Dana, how did you came in that strange field of IP?
Well, thanks, Alex, so much, and happy to be here. I'm a fan of all the content you're putting out on social media, certainly. So I'm glad to join you today. I've been in the field of IP about 25 years, mostly from the policy side. I served some time in the federal government, and then in a firm. And then with the Intellectual Property Owners Association for about 8 years, where I was the only second counsel and the director of governmental affairs at IPO, with a 50-member board of directors, so mostly large companies managing their portfolios, trying to figure out what made sense for them, what was holding them back, what they wanted to advocate for to the U.S. government and the U.S. Congress. I then spent 10 years at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I'm probably one of the few people that can say they worked under two very different administrations. I was there for all 8 years of the Obama administration and the first 2 years of the first Trump administration. So certainly very different viewpoints on a lot of policy issues, although the goals of the PTO, many of those goals remain the same. I was a member of the executive committee and led the government affairs office, intergovernmental and government affairs office. So I was the person between the U.S. government agency and Capitol Hill, translating, trying to help Hill staffers understand what was important in IP, what the impact of the changes that they were contemplating would have. And then, frankly, probably most importantly, the importance of the PTO to be able to keep all of the fees that it was collecting and actually run an efficient operation. So those are the kind of primary, but probably the biggest thing that I did during that time was I was there both before and after. So in the lead up, making the case for, and also the implementation of the American Invents Act, which is largest change in the patent statute in many years before that, and still hotly discussed here in the U.S. in terms of the impact, some of the unintended consequences as well, and we can certainly talk about that. I left the USPTO in 2015, and I'm sorry, 2019, and joined LESI as its executive director, position I continue to hold today, and also joined a consulting firm in DC to do IP advocacy and consulting. So I continue to stay abreast and involved in a lot of the discussions that are happening on Capitol Hill. here in the U.S. I am happily forced to think about this at a much more global side. So I've in my LESI role also have now started weighing in on a lot of the discussions in Europe and otherwise about IP, about the role of IP, the importance of IP, and I think most closest to mind, the certainty and predictability needed for IP to play the role that it needs to play. So I've had roles, Alex, in government, in the private sector, and nonprofit. I've gotten to see IP from a bunch of different perspectives. I think the short version of what I tell people now is I spent a lot of the beginning of my career on the front end of the patent system, on acquiring rights, on making sure they were certain, on making sure that the systems were working to get rights out into the market in a timely way and of high quality. I'm now on the back end. Now that you have the IP, what do you do with it? And I think that's the challenge. So it's been a fun kind of journey, and there's so many topics to talk about, including what we're going to talk about today in terms of smart cities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is really a rare case that somebody and one individual has seen so many different perspectives of this system, of this, to be honest, terrible complex system with that many different interests. For the audience, just before we start, I would like to show you that what Dana mentioned is that we really try to shade light into the field. So we have these letters. And here on the DPLEX side, we explain you important papers. For example, here a paper from two Polish guys about intellectual property issues in managing IP in a smart city. So that and we try to give you an overview what the paper is saying, a summary. We have also on the glossary of the DPLEX a dedicated entry to smart city, by the way, with an audio overview. If you don't want to read it, you can listen to it, but you have your all important questions. What means sustainable smart city? What is the role of IP within the concept of smart city? What are the broader consequences of IP management for smart city solutions, and how to implement smart city initiatives? And in addition, we have a deep dive directly on the front end of the digital IP lexicon, special for IP, all the current questions, data and technology standards, IP in collaborations, IP challenges regarding emerging technologies on these issues of smart city. So this is all available. We give you the links to the audience that you can inform you about the background of this whole issue, which is definitely quite complex. A good reason to talk with you about that, Dana. So obviously, I mean, LES is making a conference, an international conference, the annual conference. So once a year, we have one topic on LES, on the global scene, on the global stage, where we can talk about that. And LESI choose the topic of sustainable smart city. So obviously Singapore is a hot spot for that topic. Singapore is calls itself a smart nation even. So even more, so they are really deep in the topic. But the question is, why LES? So what can you explain us why licensing is really a cornerstone for the realization of this idea of a smart city? So in terms of why is LES discussing that this year in Singapore?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love the theme, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. You're right. This is our annual meeting. It's the annual global meeting of the entire society. So for those who don't know, LESI is made up of 33 separate societies around the world. It's about 6,200 individuals throughout the world. That number has certainly changed over time. About 54% of the population is from Europe. About 21% is from maybe about 25% is kind of the Americas, and then about another 20% is in Asia. I don't think that exactly equals about 100, but you get where I'm talking about. But it's organization that's been around since 1965. There's lots of events that happen, lots of discussions throughout the year, but this is really the one time we get together, not only for the kind of the business meeting of the organization, but to gather everyone and form conversations that we'll be talking about, continually. I think, yes, Singapore is a great place to be. Our LAS Singapore Society had offered a few years ago to host. It is, as you said, a great case study in terms of developing a smart city. But the theme of the smart city is just such a fantastic organizing principle for us. There's a number of sessions that will talk about smart city, from what is this, as you said, what's the definition? What is a smart city? What do we mean when we talk about this? To what do we need to ensure that we have all the systems in place to enable investment in technology, collaboration among diverse players that are needed to develop that technology, to manufacture that technology, to market that technology, and everything else. We'll move from kind of that very elementary sort of things, what do we mean, to the backbone, which is a large part of a smart city is a connected city. In order to see all these things, we need to connect them. So we'll have a significant 5G conversation. And then we'll talk about kind of the consumer-facing issues. Well, what are the things that you'd expect to see in a smart city? So what should we be driving towards? What should the consumer expect? So I kind of see, if you look at our agenda, and I encourage everyone to kind of look deeply at the way we've structured it, that's one path. Of course, there's lots of other things. We couldn't be LES if we didn't talk about food. There's actually lots of innovation in the food industry. We've got some plenary there. And then a number of other topics that you'd expect when you come to an LES meeting. But Alex, to your point, the reason why smart cities is such a great topic is because all of the same rules about the role that IP should be playing to bring parties together, to incentivize investment, to recoup investment, sunk investment, and to frankly help create not just the products, not just the services, innovative services that we want, but to actually create the collaborations that are going to make those possible. A smart city is like a regular city, but it's an even more intensely. We need all the things working that enable IP. So you need not just the ability to have IP that is certain and predictable, but you need to be able to enable more connections between like parties that want to create the innovation. In a smart city, I mean, and that's true in a regular city. And right now, we don't have all the systems in place, whether it's the government issuing the rights, whether it's the government's enabling investment or making those own investments in those critical areas of technology that we want. I don't think we're actually leveraging IP to where we can leverage more funding in those areas that we know we need to develop. And in fact, people are somewhat separate. You and I talked a little bit in the beginning. I think there too often people see IP as paying rents, as just a way to recoup the investment. Well, it certainly has to do that, but it's so much more. So when we talk about this from the LES perspective, it is how are you using that IP to create a collaboration and to move the technology forward. And this certainly extends to SEPs, standard essential patents. We can talk about that and how they're used there. But in a smart city, we have the opportunity not only to rethink what are the things that we need to keep people more connected, to respond to their needs, and to develop those technologies, whether it's in the healthcare space, whether it's in the mobility space, whether it's just simply in other consumer products that you want. We need IP that is working together. We need parties that are working together and have that ability. So in a smart city, you have an even greater opportunity to rethink this and use IP in a better way to develop the technologies we know we need.
I mean, when you mention consumer products and what consumers want, I mean, here we talk about citizens
Yeah.
in an urban environment, and we talk about infrastructure decisions for decades.
Yeah.
And also we have these smart cities in Amsterdam and Barcelona. They started in the late 90s with that, and with infrastructure creations, which whole districts like the Pungon district in Singapore are created with digital, with free Wi-Fi, with optical fibers, and then all comes together with cybersecurity, robotics,
Hmm.
mobility, smart traffic. So all things which we would like to see, but we don't have that so far. In terms, so I think that makes it even more. Um, um, the pressure is even higher here because the stakes are so high. So the investments are for such a long time, and we see these convergence of all that critical technologies like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, blockchain, big data analysis. So that all comes together to create things like AI powered traffic management systems and smart public transportations, digital twins for city modeling. It's unbelievable what is
Yeah.
necessary. And I would say, especially your point, when you just think, I have now an exclusivity position because I have a patent for a piece of technology, and that
Yeah.
and that will generate the money. This is exactly not enough. So I would say
Yeah. That's right.
LAS is an organization which is per definition, because licensing means collaboration. Otherwise, we don't see a licensing. So we need at
Yeah.
least two parties which have to
Yep.
work together. And
Yep. Yep.
I would say the smart city is an idea, is a concept which lives from collaboration, collaborative solutions, and that makes it so challenging. So from an exclusivity position, in terms of you have to pay because I have the patent, that won't work. And
Yeah.
so this whole experience, global experience from LAS, can come here, and this is a stage on which we can discuss that kind of necessary frameworks which we need and to agree on from different industries, from different countries. Otherwise, we cannot realize it. Is that a perspective which explains why LAS is really promoting that?
Yeah, yeah. I think I couldn't have said it better. I mean, we our mission statement includes that we connect people and we create opportunities. So implicit in that is that by connecting people and the resources and that come behind them, and getting them to sit down and talk, you can create a conversation that didn't exist before. But conversations are great. In order to then actually make some progress in developing technology, you need to bring some assets to the table, which are what have you invented, what is your IP, but also something to help mitigate the risk. I want to be able to not just, as we said, not just pay for rents, but be able to invest in a technology and continue going forward. Things like that don't always happen. What IP allows is it enables you to help it mitigate some of that risk to move forward. When you're sitting around a negotiation table with someone else, say, well, I'm going to put in something and you put in something and we'll work together. Everyone kind of is very clear on what they're investing into a collaboration and hopefully on what they'll get out. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that you said, you kind of talked about, there's a number of cities that are adopting smart city technologies, and they're getting smarter. I don't know if they're yet a smart city. There's a sense that you have the opportunity to kind of build something from the ground up. I think Singapore has probably done that in a lot of really, really good ways. And as you said, it's a good case study. I think there's a number of, like cities we've heard kind of in China that have developed literally from nothing, from the ground up. So how would you develop that city? And this concept of the digital twin, particularly on urban landscaping and infrastructure, is fascinating to me. But that could be incorporated into kind of some of our older cities as well, as we try to figure out how to make them more smart. I think my focus has been on making the people more smart first, about how to navigate IP systems and using and leveraging their assets.
Yeah, and what you're saying with China is especially true when we look at the patent landscape, and that
Yeah.
China is leading. It's not just that, they realize smart cities; they also dominate the patent space. So I think we are safe when we say you will not be able to realize a smart city without China players on your table. So that makes it even. So maybe this is the first time that we have such a concept, which you cannot realize without Chinese player and without that discussion. Very, very careful, very significant contributions to that. There is a question I would like just to take the opportunity to bring it on the table. That Maria Boisova-Weinand says that she asking you directly what you're looking forward personally, what you would like, which aspect you find especially important, what you would like to discuss in Singapore.
I think there's a bunch of topics I'm really interested in. Alex, I was preparing for this. I was trying to get how do I describe myself? And I'm a consumer of case studies, which is why I'm a fan of yours, because you put out a lot of great case studies. You can kind of think about how the IP is used. I think we'll do that in LESI in Singapore, and I'm excited about that. I am, of course, I'm excited to kind of bring the global community together because we throughout the year now, post-COVID, we connect a lot virtually, but actually getting folks together and looking at people face to face. Your depth of understanding of the issue is a bit more, and building relationships, all those things are great, and that's kind of a core to LES. That said, I am most excited about some of the interactive components that we're adding this year. So one of the things that we've done is we brought in a company called House of Knowledge. They're also helping us sponsor the event to run an interactive. What's that?
Magnus Hagfag.
Magnus, exactly, who I think is also a fan of yours.
We are both fan of each other.
Excellent. The Mutual Appreciation Society.
Yeah, he's lecturer in the master program, and he's every year he makes his serious game in the master program, and the students, or let's call them participants, are really engaged, and they are so happy to have that. So Magnus is great on that, and I'm happy to hear that he supports LAS in Singapore on that.
We're bringing him to Singapore. So we're bringing him to Singapore to do the same thing. And I think you're right. He's now done a serious game for a couple of the LES societies. I know he's also done it at WIPO for a group. And it's a way to make sure people are not only paying attention, but really can be challenged and think about what they're doing and how it can be incorporated into the scenario in front of them. It also allows all those people around to say, "Oh wow, I wouldn't have thought about that." So I think the scenario, the serious game that Magnus is going to put that together is great. We have a second, and it's Magnus, and it's a collaboration of about 3 of our LES committees, including our Young Members Committee and our WILA committee on our Dispute Resolution Committee, all kind of coming together and participating in this one. Similarly, we have another kind of interactive hackathon that our Life Sciences Committee, our Tech Transfer Committee, and a few others are putting together. And there's a couple of sessions in advance of the meeting where they're using AI to create a scenario that then will be presented at the meeting, and they'll out of that kind of produce how do you use the tool to better advise you leveraging the IP to prompt the questions that you need when you're trying to develop an effective licensing strategy. So I'm excited about that as well. They're a bit more interactive. It's not just the panel. Of course, we have a bunch of panel discussions which are great on all topics. Some of them will lean towards smart cities. Others will lean towards more of the practice-oriented areas. And we have a couple great kind of single voices as well that'll be talking. Alan Fan from Huawei is certainly one. Judge Gill from the Singapore court is another. A couple other shout outs. I'll say my old boss, Dave Kapos, the former head of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, is on our very first plenary panel. So, Alex, you talked about kind of defining what do we think is a smart city. This is something that I know he's been focused on for years at IBM and then even in his current life. So,
David is always one of my first presentations, which I give to the master students. So when he talked about the digital transformation, and that are brilliant slides, and I give them always to the students so for years now, and say, okay, what exactly does Mr. Kapos means here? That's
yeah.
great. He's wonderful, and having Huawei is obviously a good choice in terms of giving the floor to one of the major players in the whole game. And this is maybe for the Europeans difficult, maybe even more difficult for the US, but they are a major player on that game, and we have to deal with that. Then I would like to proceed a little bit to a topic which is the elephant in the room. Okay, nobody wants to mention maybe, but obviously we have to talk a little bit about SAP licensing, even when it is a war game. It has many battles in different branches. I think it is. So my perspective on the field is, first of all, the interoperability branch, telecommunication, was the first one who saw these, first the mobile wars, then the smartphone wars. And obviously we learned a lot from that. Okay, so we saw that, by the way, the LED branch is one branch which learned the hard way that it doesn't make any sense to fight against each other anymore. So they learned that a constructive licensing environment makes sense, because the white light LED cannot be produced without different licenses from different companies, and they realized that at the end they ride a dead horse when they fight against each other, because the classic light bulbs went down, and also the LEDs is not that big business simply because they live too long. Okay, anyway, so many branches learned the hard way that just fighting against each other won't solve the problem, that the kind of collaboration is much more important. Also, when it comes about SAP and the difference about the innovators on the one hand and the implementers on the other hand. I don't want to say that implementers are not innovative, but the companies who hold these SEPs. And then we have industry, which are simply affected by that, not natural born. They are affected by interoperability, like the automotive industry, and they had to learn how to work with it. So when it comes to smart city, what would you say? What is an approach how we can we can use that learnings from these different industries to make that more, feasible and easier, more, the economics would say, more efficient to work with the SAP logics?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great topic. It's been one that certainly LES has spent a lot of time talking about, but lots and lots of others. To me, Alex, the standard setting is you have to look at it as it's a public good. In the same way that we talked about, the only way we're going to achieve the technologies that we know we need in the future is to figure out how to better collaborate and to bring parties together. And in my view, that IP is the glue. It's the piece that helps all the people around the table come together, feel like they can stay at the table together, and then figure out what the solution is. Well, the same thing on when you think about standard setting activities, it's to bring all the parties together to figure out how they're going to move forward. And we've talked about oftentimes the thing that becomes the standard, maybe it isn't the best technology. It is just the technology that's selected, but it's the technology that's selected so that all the players around the table can say, okay, now that we know it's selected, now that we know what to drive development of our technology for, we can make it more connected. We can make it more seamless. We have the opportunity to make the market acceptance of these technologies greater because they know that their devices will work together. So, when you think of the standard process, it really is, there's a public good in it, in enabling these things to go forward. Now, the IP is critical to it. So the debates that we've had are by engaging in this, by engaging in a standards activity, you do agree to make your technology available. And there's lots of disagreement about what that means in terms of certainly royalty rates and how that royalty rate is set. Do you give up all your rights or do you not? I think I can speak from between the US perspective and the European perspective. We've seen really two different attacks to this. And in the US, both when I was in government and out, there was a long conversation about the role of government in determining what the royalty rate could be, what the party's responsibilities and abilities are. Certainly, there is guidelines from my former employer, USPTO, and the Department of Justice that were issued and then withdrawn, and then new ones were issued. And then in the third administration, the administration just withdrew entirely from even opining on this. So there's a real question about, is there a role for government here, or do we need marketplace solutions to help, and frankly, the court to help resolve cases where there's a dispute? But I think that, I start from the perspective that standard setting activities are critical because for me, it's not the product that you're setting the standard in, but it's all the other products that are developed on top of that. All the technology and all the investments that need to be made for that technology where we want to get to, or maybe that we haven't even imagined yet. You need the technology community to come together. And then the problem comes in then when you have people like me, you have attorneys that come in and say, okay, but here are these different assets. How do we determine the reasonable royalty? And same thing applies again, as we talked about in a smart city as otherwise. You're always going to have parties that come to the table and they have different views about how valuable your contribution is to this technology. So you get parties together and you say, okay, let's come up with something that we can agree on based on what we know in the market, based on what we think we know about how the technology will be adopted and otherwise. And you get two parties that come, have a meeting of the minds, and then they move forward. One is compensated. Maybe they're working together towards technology. Maybe they're not. There's different models, but at least they have to get to the same place. I think we've been stuck in this place, certainly both in the US and in Europe, on what is the environment we need to create that predictability, to keep those people at that table and not make litigation an essential part of every time you license technology. And
is obviously inefficient.
It's utterly inefficient, and it prevents the technology from moving as fast as it might otherwise move. It prevents the money, the funding from moving as fast as otherwise may move towards the technology that we want to develop. And it certainly keeps the parties from working together. So you're not always going to have people who hold the assets and then work together with the person that's going to license. Sometimes you just want to provide access to that license, and you want to provide, freedom to operate in those licenses. Well, in those cases too, that entity says, I don't have any interest in working with you, but I do have interest in your technology. And here's what I think is the reasonable rate to pay. We need to figure out, and it's not one thing, it's probably a series of things. What are the things that we need to do in government and in private sector to create more certainty around that engagement when you and I are sitting around the table and deciding what we think is reasonable based on things that have not come to fruition yet, things that we can't identify, and also things that are based on data. You know, you talked about the impact of China and the necessity of Chinese technology to be in this. I think that's absolutely true. I looked at just recently a list that Tim Pullman from LexisNexis had sent me in terms of where the standardized technology is held, both by company and also regionally. And you look at just the U.S. versus China, and China's holding more patents in those standards that are actively being used than certainly the U.S. or Europe. So I think that's right. I think that we have to really look at where those standardized technologies that we need to provide access to or enable access to are coming from. I think it's also a good lesson to governments to say this is where we need to be investing when you look at that kind of list. But then the last takeaway from that, and again, I spend some of my professional life on this, it is, what are the laws that need to be in place to create more certainty? Right now, there's just too many ways to upset that discussion at the negotiation table and to cause people to say, I'm going to go to litigation. And it goes down to the value of an IP right is directly related to the certainty and predictability of that right and your ability to enforce it. And certainly I can say in the US, there's multiple forums that you can challenge, rights can be challenged. And there's legislation in front of Congress right now to limit serial petitions, to make changes to the implementation of the administrative proceedings at the USPTO. I think there's some promise and also some additional challenge to the UPC coming online and being potentially a forum where you get more certainty in SEPs. It's really for someone who is a holder of rights that on their own or incorporated into a standard essential patent. You really have to think very carefully about where you're going to enforce, where you're going to seek certainty, and then where your market is that you want to bring those rights. So your global licensing strategy may start in Europe and not in the US if you're a US company these days. And it seems to me like that is the trend. But wherever you're sitting in the world, thinking critically about where you seek certainty first, and then where you market and where your partners are going to be or where your licensees are going to be is really, really important. I'll add one more thing to this too, because we haven't really talked about it in any depth, but marketplace solutions to some of these things, like patent pools, like what Sysvel is doing, what like Avanci is doing, particularly in the automotive area, is also fascinating to me. And I think that to the extent that they are offering a package, offering a series of rights that allow for the freedom to operate for a company, I think that's incredibly valuable to the extent that they're doing it in a very transparent way that also communicates, here's where we know the value is. I think is really, really critical going forward. And I make that comment on the tails of the intention to withdraw the draft EU regs, where the conversation of transparency was certainly very, very dominant, along with the proper role of government in providing some stability here. So I think there's lots of hope in the private sector solutions to some of the uncertainty that we have here. On the business solutions, I think it's going to rely on their ability to communicate lots of information about why you should stay at the table or why you should take that license, what the value of those rights are.
So I'm very careful with the term value, to be honest. I like that US guys throwing that all the time around of you. So I think that are prices, and this is something completely different. So first of that, okay, so value is something which you have or I have or a certain party have. It's a subjective value. And what we see at the end, what somebody's offering, what is the outcome of a negotiation is a price. And a price tag is something completely different. But whatever. I think that this goes to a certain direction of Bowman Hayden. So his suggestion
I'm also a fan of Bowman's.
of his pool solution.
Yeah.
Also very interesting, interesting approach, and maybe also very important because simply we have in 5G now 75,000 standard essential declared patents. So it is important, and this is just from a smart city perspective, just one technology. So we have to bring so much more in it that on a patent to patent situation and with infringement claims and whatever, and in front of courts, we would never ever solve that whole problem. That's for sure.
Yep.
So we agree completely on that.
We agree completely, and I like your I think your caveat on that's right. Exactly, the value of a right cannot be just price, because for you, Alex, I might be willing to agree to a much lesser price as long as we're going to work together. So I think you're absolutely right. It's a whole picture.
I show to my students always this scene from Life of Brian, where Brian needs this beard to be as a masquerade because the Romans are behind him, and then he wants to buy it on a market, and on the stand on the booth is a Jewish guy, and he wants to haggle, and Brian just want to get it. And I always show them, the students say, okay, yes, there is a price at the end, but you can, and even this is a negotiation, but would you call it a market price? I mean, the one has the pressure of live and die, and the other just want to haggle because it's a cultural behavior on that market.
Right,
just to mention the difference of values, objective and prices. Okay, final question with and please, we have only 3 minutes, less than 3 minutes left. In the smart city, that's for sure, we need many stakeholders which have to agree, come together, find solutions in a positive spirit, and especially to make it sustainable, to make it better for living there, for the citizens, for us as the population. We have private companies, we have completely different interests which come together here. And what would you say, what is the role here of a, let's say, in terms of thought leadership, of giving a kind of direction, where could a solution lie? What is the role here of LASI and the upcoming conference in Singapore?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. It's a good final question. I think, look, the role of LESI is to pull together all these parties to figure out how do we solve these problems. And there's problems all along the path, from the initial research and development to all the way to the marketplace, and then how the consumer is actually using it. There's challenges all along the way, and they're not easy challenges, and we're going to have to focus some time and energy together. So what LESI does is it pulls us all together in the same room and allows us to talk about some of those too. I think a second thing is, and we've tried to do that with this program, is it focuses the discussion. There's so many things that you could focus on and spend your time on. Well, we try to provide some direction to, here are the problems that we're looking at. Let's spend some time and working on it. Let's bring some people together to talk about it. But then also be able to be open to listening to the problems that we're not thinking of. So it's when you go to a conference like LESI and others as well, at very least, not only are you in the same room as people, but you get a sense of what people are thinking. And you for a moment, you get to do a deep dive on particular problems. And when you walk away, you say, that was raised during this conference. I'm still thinking about it. That's the real benefit of bringing people together in the same room and having a conversation, because you kind of you focus your discussion, you focus your thinking a little bit more, and that may make you go in a different direction that you hadn't expected to going in. So I think that's the real big benefit of LESI.
And that makes it to a certain extent really unique, isn't it? I mean, where can you do that on that, let's say, neutral point of view and stage? So thank you very much, Dana, for joining us today here on that terrific complex problem, but also very promising that we learn more and more to deal with their complexities with IP management and not with IP as such. So the management is the issue. And so thank you very much. To the audience, first of all, Dana and I, we will stay on LinkedIn for the next time, and we will answer to your questions. I saw some of them, but we simply don't have the time to pick them up. And for the ones who are interested in AI, so on Friday, we have the next live event together with Benjamin Del Sol. We talk about patenting AI. Here we talk about use cases about patenting AI on Friday as a preparation for our certificate. We have an university course early April, 2 days, a certificate for patenting AI at SAPI. So that is very important that you keep that in mind, that it makes a difference when you communicate your ability as, for example, a patent attorney, that it makes sense that you learn that not just from scratch up, so you get all the practice and you get your certificate from SAPI, that you have that you can show to third parties what you have learned there, and also for the industry representatives. So we talk about that on Friday with Benjamin Del Sol, who is one of the lecturers on that program in April, early April, 1st and 2nd April in Strasbourg. We make it hybrid so everybody can attend. Okay, thank you very much for today. Enjoy your afternoon, Dana, and to the audience, thank you for joining us. Bye-bye. And most of you, I hope I see you on Friday again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.